Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please consider leaving a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. I wanted to take a moment to let you know that I am doing a Lost Mom Bereaved Mother's Day gift exchange again this year. Mother's Day can be a really hard time of year for lost moms. Some don't have living children at home and may feel forgotten about or not treated like a, quote, real mom. Others do have living children, but are still desperately missing the one who isn't here. This exchange is a way to both give and receive a little comfort around one of those really tough days of the year. You get paired with another lost mom and send a gift, and then you also receive a gift in return. The limit is $25 on the gifts as well. You have until March 23rd to sign up, so check out the post on Instagram or Facebook for more details and the link to sign up. Today's business spotlight is from Amy Swenson, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Here is what she had to say.
Hi, I'm Amy Swenson. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in California. I'm certified in perinatal mental health, and I'm a reproductive coach worldwide. I provide virtual and in-person therapy for all things reproductive in California. I help people with fertility issues, whether you're struggling to conceive, have an infertility diagnosis, or have experienced losses, or you're using IUI or IVF to build your family. I help people who are struggling in their pregnancy after infertility and or loss and with postpartum adjustments. I also provide intended parent psychoeducational consultations for those who are using donor eggs, sperm, embryos, or surrogates, where we talk about common issues and important topics to consider when using donors or surrogates to build a family. You can find more information on my therapy offerings on my website, amyswensonmft.com. Additionally, I provide reproductive coaching worldwide. I have a group coaching program called Empowered Conceptions, Pregnancy, and Postpartum. I help women who are struggling with their emotions while trying to conceive, while pregnant after infertility and or loss, and postpartum. We work to create boundaries to reduce anxiety, develop personalized self-care practices, and increase support and empowerment. We look at mindfulness, meditation, sleep, self-compassion, and so much more. You can find my free group on Facebook called Empowered Conceptions, Pregnancy, and Postpartum, a program for women, which is full of resources, support, and weekly free trainings on various topics related to reproduction that are recorded and available for replay. You can find more information on my coaching offerings on my website, amyswensoncoaching.com. I specialize in reproduction due to my personal experience with infertility, pregnancy after infertility and loss, and difficult postpartum adjustments. I began my family building journey with unexplained infertility. After trying on our own for over a year, we successfully conceived our son on our second round of IUI. He was born 5 weeks early, and my postpartum adjustment to being a first-time mom of a preemie was not easy. By the time we were ready to try for a second baby, my fertility changed dramatically. I had high FSH, low AMH, diminished ovarian reserve, and possible mild PCOS. Many rounds of IUI were unsuccessful, and we moved on to IVF with a couple miscarriages along the way. We conceived our daughter on our one and only round of IVF, where we had one day 3 embryo. I have dedicated my life to helping women who are struggling with stress, anxiety, and depression while trying to conceive, while pregnant, and postpartum. I sought out training through the American Society for Reproductive Medicine and Postpartum Support International. You can find my therapy information again on my website, amyswensonmft.com. That's amyswensonmft.com. or amyswensoncoaching.com, and my Facebook group, Empowered Conceptions, Pregnancy and Postpartum, a program for women on Facebook.
Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing your services and your journey with us. So today I am talking with Amy Watson from Smooth Stones Coaching. She has been through 2 pregnancy losses, including her daughter who was stillborn due to a possible placental abruption and a 14-week miscarriage. Amy shares her journey and how she now helps other women who are going through fertility and pregnancy struggles. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Amy from Smooth Stone Coaching. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, there's so many things. What do I start with? I'm a Canadian that lives in Utah now. I am a coach. I have a podcast and a coaching business where I help lost parents, mostly moms, as we know, but just kind of figure out this life after loss thing. I have six living kids and two babies in heaven. And I've kind of spent the last 10 years, it's one of those like, I never thought this would be my life, but after our daughter was stillborn, I just kind of dove into figuring out grief. And it just naturally happened that like people would say, I shared my story pretty openly. And so people would say, "Hey, Amy, like my friend's baby died. Could you talk to them?" Or, um, I had a loss and they would reach out and so it just kind of organically happened that through different like charity work that I did after my loss to help myself heal, um, and then like volunteering and just word of mouth was just kind of helping people all along. And so a few years ago, I just started a business doing it a little bit more in an organized way. And but yeah, I would say I'm a mom first. I have two kids that are out of the house and four that I'm still taking care of. So that's really, really busy. I love DIY stuff. I love like woodworking and painting my house. It's like really fun for me. And I love baking and really just hanging out with my family and being outside. So that's kind of like me in a nutshell, I guess.
Sounds like you have a lot of unique talents.
I always used to say that I'm like not super, super good at any one thing, but like I'm really interested in lots of things. And I think the biggest part is just being willing to try it and be terrible at first. Like the first room I painted was just bad. And like when we took the tape off, the paint all came off. And you just keep going and keep going and then you get better. So,
Like, but I tried, right? That's all that matters. I can
yep.
only go up from here.
Yeah. Yeah. But I would say like helping people after loss is definitely a passion and something that I think I've gotten really good at over the years.
So, do you mind talking a little bit about your lost story?
I don't. It's kind of a long one because, and so you just tell me, you know, whatever you want. But like my first four pregnancies were totally textbook. I mean, we had a couple of hiccups here and there, as you do, but I had always wanted six kids. And the first four were just pretty easy. I had four kids in 6 years and it was like overwhelming, but I was grateful. I had pretty boring pregnancies. Our fifth pregnancy was also pretty boring, textbook. I was really like just being a mom and lots of stuff going on and we were really really excited to have a baby and we found out we are having another girl. So we had four girls and we were having our fifth girl.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I was a little bit shocked, not shocked, but I was like, well, this is interesting because I grew up with just brothers. I'd always been more friends with guys. And I don't know, it was just funny to have all these girls. Um, but I loved it because I didn't have any sisters. So I had all these girls. And right up until the end, we were fine. Like everything was fine. My mom flew into town from Canada to help us with the girls whenever I went into the hospital. And we were just doing our thing, nesting. Grandma was there. I was like busy, like all these projects I hadn't been able to do. I was doing them. And we had gone on an adventure. We lived by a national park. And so we went and took my mom there and we were like hiking. And I was like, oh, this will get things going. We'll walk this baby out, you know, all the things that you're doing in the last week before you have a baby. And then I think that night after we'd gone outdoors and done all these things, I kind of thought I felt contractions. And so I was kind of excited, but this was my fifth time around. We lived really close to the hospital. So I was like, I'm just going to see what happens. I'm going to walk around. I remember staying up that night, just walking, and I had written down like the contraction times, and they were kind of like going, and then they kind of just petered out, like they stopped. And I was really tired at that point, so I went to bed, but I'd kind of been up all night thinking, like, by tomorrow, baby's going to be here. Um, so I went to bed. When I woke up, I told my husband, and we had plans to go out that day. We were going to go to lunch because grandma was there, but we are like, let's stay close to home. And I realized during that morning, I was like, I haven't felt her kick for a while. And she wasn't super duper active, but I was like, I haven't felt her kick for a while. But I think, like, I knew stillbirth existed. We had friends at church who just a few years before had like a pretty full-term stillbirth. And I remember thinking that is the saddest thing like that I've ever heard, like how awful. Like I just we were heartbroken for them and like cried for them. And so I knew that it happened. I had friends and was aware of it, but you just don't think it's you. You just don't think. And even I called into my clinic and I was like, I haven't felt her kicking. We probably should check. And they weren't like, get to the hospital now. They just made us an appointment for later that afternoon, which looking back, it's like, I don't know. And also one of those things is we were supposed to have an appointment the day before. Normally I would have had an appointment, but my doctor was out of town. So we went in for this appointment, and as I'm sure you've heard before, they put the Doppler on, nothing. And they don't say anything. It was a different doctor that day that I hadn't had. And so he's like, they have a little in-office ultrasound, a little laptop thing. And he's like, let's just do that. And he does that and still like quiet. And then he says, well, let's go to the hospital. Let's go to the big ultrasound machine and, check it out. And at that point, we're 39 and a half weeks. If you can't find the heartbeat, like you're pretty sure what's happening. But I remember just going to that waiting room and sitting, and they left my husband and I there. Luckily he could be there. He works a lot. He didn't come to a lot of the appointments. We'd done this so many times, and but he was there that day, and I'm so grateful for that. But we just sat there, and everyone's reaction is different, but mine was just like quiet. Like it's like, oh, this is happening. And how do I tell my girls? I think that was my first thought, was how do I tell my girls? They were like 9, 8, 6, and 3. My 3-year-old had been to every single appointment. The doctor let her put the Doppler on my belly. Like they were so excited for their baby sister. And it's just like, how do you do that? How do you explain this? How do you, they thought we were going to have their sister. And my mom thought that, and everybody thought that. And it's like, this is completely not what we expected. So yeah, I mean, we basically moved on. I think the hospital we were in was really, really small. And so I think they were a little bit in shock too, because I did not go home. They just kind of walked me back to labor and delivery and were like, we're going to induce you. Which again, we live literally, like I could see the hospital from my house. And I didn't think like I should go pack a bag, or I should go talk to my kids, or I should go like get some things settled. I just was like, okay. And so my husband had to go home and sit the girls down and tell them what was happening. And and like they didn't understand, it was just a lot to deal with. And I think he did kind of maybe grab a couple things and then came back. And yeah, I don't e- I don't even know if I like had even cried at that point. It was like this heavy, quiet, just like, I don't know, how do I do this? Um, but I did kind of go into, okay, like I've been induced. Actually, I had been induced 3 out of the 4 girls. So I knew what an induction was like. I knew what I needed to do. I knew what I wanted and what I could and couldn't do. Um, and so I think I just went into like, let's get her here. And this is my task. And I'm going to do the best I can to get her here. But that was a long wait. And it was a kind of a long process, longer than with a living baby. And, um, but then during that time, of course, people are coming, my in-laws came down to where we were, and they started talking about like burial plots and funeral plans and what do we do with the body, and what forms do we have to fill out. And I just remember thinking like, I just, I have to deliver this baby who has died. Like, I can't do funeral plans right now. Um, and and so it was a whole lot. But we did end up having her at like 3 in the morning. It was just really just my husband and I. It was really quiet. Um, and I didn't know what to expect. They didn't prepare us especially, or like I wasn't sure. I was nervous. But she was beautiful. She was perfect. And yeah, they just think that something happened with her placenta, and it had maybe partially abrupted enough that she passed away, and it had not been very long. They said it had probably happened within that last 24 hours, judging by her condition and everything. Um, so yeah, we got to spend a little bit of time with her. We did have someone come and take pictures. We had someone take hand and feet prints, and helped us a little bit there. But yeah, we didn't spend a lot of time because nobody told us that we could. And that's something I do now as a volunteer. I do help in the hospital when babies pass away. And I always say, like, you have time, you have more time than you think. But we had her at 3 a.m. We had the photographer and the girls come over at like 9 a.m. And by 11, they were like, hey, you can go home. Um, so yeah, 8 hours after giving birth to my daughter, I was at home and trying to rest. Everyone was like, rest. And I was like, I can't lay in my room by myself because I will just cry. Um, so yeah, and that started my grief journey. Um, and I guess, like, long story short, we ended up having another baby a year later, which was a whole crazy journey. That was like the hardest year of my life, like easily. And then went on to have another miscarriage at 14 weeks. Had a DNC and almost bled to death. So that was pretty traumatic. And then had our final baby, who ended up being a really high risk pregnancy, had preeclampsia, ended up having him early. But thankfully, he made it here safe at 35 weeks. And he's just like a little joy and just started kindergarten. But yeah, it's like my first 4 were just easy. And my last 4 pregnancies were just this huge roller coaster, um, of loss and fear and just, and joy, and, just all mixed together.
Yeah, pregnancy after loss is definitely just undescribable sometimes, like just everything you go through, you know. It's being afraid like every day that like this baby is gone too.
Yep.
So were there any particular things that helped you with your grief?
For me, I really I'm like I love to learn and to read, and if I see a problem, like I want to learn about it and figure out what to do. So for me, a lot of what helped was learning about grief. I read all the books. I had so many books. And in back in those days, like 2013, there was blogs, a lot of blogs. Um, there was an online magazine called Still Standing, which I think still exists, but it's different than it was before. And I joined some Facebook groups because we lived in a really small town. There wasn't a lot of resources available locally. But yeah, what helped me most, I think, is just understanding that the things I was going through were normal and they were grief and there wasn't anything wrong with me. And I just learned, I guess, how to be gentle with myself, how to just allow it, how to talk about it with my kids. That was a big one. Like, how do I help my children process this while I'm trying to process this? And also my relationship. Like, my husband's grief was not the same as mine. It didn't look the same, it didn't sound the same. Um, but that didn't mean that anything was going wrong. And so I think just learning about that and allowing for it really, really helped me. And I just decided on my own somehow. I don't remember how I came to this, but I told myself, I'm going to give myself a year. Like back in the day when the widows would wear black or whoever, they would wear black for a year. And I kind of thought, I wish I could do that. I know there's like pros and cons to that tradition, but I thought I wish people could see that I am mourning. And there's nothing magic about a year. It's not, it's arbitrary, it's made up, but I just told myself this year is going to be really hard and I'm just going to do what I need to do to heal, to take care of my family and just do the bare minimum. So I think another thing that really helped was I I call it bringing in the circle. So you have just like the essentials of life, they're in the middle of the circle. And then you have all these other things. And you got to like let go of the things on the edge and really bring it back to just the basics of what's most important to you. And I think that really helped because I was a person who like love to be doing all the things, and I go to a church that's very like busy. I was in charge of the children at church, and there was a point where I had to tell them I can't. Like for a while it was good. I actually loved being in with the children because I didn't have to deal with everyone's like sad faces and questions, and you know um it just was safe in there. But there was a point where I was like, I don't have the energy. And that was a big deal for me because in our church we like don't, if you are given a job, and we call it a calling, like we believe that like God kind of puts people where they need to be. um and to say I can't do this was like a big deal for me, to stand up for myself and to say this is too much right now. And helping at the school, or all these things, that all these hats that I was wearing, I was like, I'm just going to grieve though. Just going to cry, and I'm not going to wear makeup, and I'm just going to say no to things. And I think for probably a lot of people listening too, it's like, yeah, you got to get good at saying no and saying, I just do not have the energy for it. It's not where I want to be. I don't want to be in big crowds of people. I don't want to make small talk. I don't want to do these things, and that's okay.
I think that's a really hard thing for people too, because it's like we expect it of ourselves, and like I guess society expects it of us to just like be the same person we were before our loss and to do all the same things in the exact same way. And that's just not how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think giving yourself space and time, for example, I think it took me a month or more. So again, at that way back in ancient times, we had a family blog. That's how I kind of kept in touch, told people what was going on with my family because we did live far away from everyone. It took me like a month or more to even just write the story of what had happened and like share it, And so things like that where you got to just let it happen when it happens and when it feels good. And if it doesn't feel good, then, you don't have to do anything. So just adjusting your expectations and your timeline and doing grief your way instead of what people maybe expect or what you expect, because it's just really unpredictable.
Did
So
you
that was
find,
important. Go ahead.
sorry, no, I was just going to say, did you find that like in all of your research and learning that your perception of grief changed from what it was before?
That is a great question. I My perception of grief before, I mean, I think I'm a pretty empathetic person. I always try to help, but yeah, you don't understand it until you go through it. And I grew up like we did not go to cemetery. We didn't visit graves. It was a little more, my grandma's British. It was a little more stiff upper lip. Like you don't, I don't remember talking about it a whole lot or being affected by it a whole lot. Um, but I think what changed was, hmm, yeah, I think just the depths of it and the all encompassingness of it um, was, I think for most people it's surprising. And especially with pregnancy loss, we have this idea that if you were 6 weeks, it hurts less than if you were full term, or if there's like this hierarchy. And I think I just realized that, you know, grief is grief and it's your own. And there just aren't rules. So, and I realized like how important it was to reach out, to help people, to say something, to say the baby's name, to drop something off, to offer whatever help you can give. Because I used to hold myself back. That was a big lesson for me in grief was if I knew someone was hurting, I always wanted to help because that's just like how I was raised, or that's in my nature to like serve and help and try to make, help people feel better. But I would say, well, I don't know them very well, or I don't know, maybe they don't like flowers, or maybe, I don't have time to make a big home cooked meal, so I won't do anything. And I would kind of talk myself out of it because I would feel awkward. But after grief, I was like, oh yeah, something is better than nothing. That's what I always tell people. Because a lot of people ask me, like, what do I do? And I'm like, do what feels right to you. Do what you can do, what like fits in your talent level and your energy level. Um, but yeah, I think that was something I learned is like there are so many people that are so kind. Um, and it's also just so important to be there and to be there for the long haul. Um, so yeah, I don't even know what my initial thoughts about grief were, but it definitely there's no other way to learn it besides doing it and being in it. Um, but but again, like I said before, if you understand this is grief, this is the process, this is basically what most people go through. Not that there's those 5 stages, um, those are not really applicable, but yeah, there is a process. There is just something comforting about knowing that this is just what it is.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, it's nice to have the community of other lost parents who have been through the same process and who understand what you're feeling, so you don't feel like I'm the only one like feeling this. Like this is the process we all go through after losing a baby. Even if we don't all respond the exact same way, I think there's always someone out there who understands how you feel.
Yeah, and I've talked to people who really weren't phased. Like they had an early miscarriage, they weren't phased by it, and I think there's space for that too. Like I've had some guests on my podcast and they're like, "Yeah, it really wasn't. They felt like it wasn't meant to be. They weren't that upset." And that's okay too. Like all the reactions are okay because I think we judge ourselves, especially in baby loss, right? It's like there's just we have these ideas of how we should be grieving. And I think when we judge ourselves, we just add an extra layer of pain that doesn't need to be there because you can't mess this up. It's just, it is messy already. So just roll with it and be kind to yourself is so important.
I definitely agree with that too. And being kind to other people. Because like you said, there is kind of that hierarchy of, well, I was 39 weeks, you were only 6 weeks. Like, what are you upset about? And it's like, okay, but everybody's allowed to grieve their loss, no matter how far along they are. Like they all matter. We can't, I don't like the whole like hierarchy thing.
Yeah, for sure. And where I see it, like with my clients, is that internalize. Like even if you believe outwardly and like what I call like your higher brain, like intellectually you know that a loss is a loss, but we still judge ourselves because I don't know why it's so pervasive. Um, but it's in there. So figuring out, oh, I do kind of believe that earlier is easier or should be easier, or later is harder or whatever. Um, it's like we have to look at those beliefs inside of ourselves and how we're using them against ourselves because that's really hard too. And then, yeah, like you said, always like that comparing and it's not a competition. Like it all sucks. We all just need to help each other. And
Exactly.
it's just a lot easier, when you can do that.
So did you have like a favorite book or two that you read about grief?
I read so many. It's a lot. Um, I remember reading this, trying to think. The one I remember reading most was Empty Cradle, Broken Heart, because I think that one is a very all encompassing book. Like it really touched on a lot of things. And I remember at the time kind of wishing it was more geared to like what I was dealing with. But overall, I thought that was a great book. Um, yeah, I honestly can't even remember all the ones that I read. There's a little book for members of my church, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is called Gone Too Soon. And it was kind of a more specifically geared to like our beliefs. And that was helpful, like the way she explored it and like went through different scriptures and all of that. But I also read a lot of stories of just people who had been through hard things. And if you dive into history or biographies or you really learn about people, people you admire, you find out so many people have gone through the loss of a child or a very significant grief in their life. And then you see like how did they deal with it? How did they become who they are, in spite of that or because of that? And And I always just kind of mentally take note of people's stories, like celebrities or political figures or, just people throughout history, and just say, wow, like so many people know grief. It's just the way we talk about it, we kind of like sweep it under the rug. But that was really helpful to me, is to read stories of people I admired and recognizing the hard things that they had been through as well. And so again, I think it's like building that just mental network of other people get it. Like other people have been through this and they're amazing, and they're living life. And that was kind of my goal all along. And that's my message now, is always your life is still going to be amazing, because at the beginning, grief is telling you like your life is going to be awful forever. And that's totally normal. That's part of the process. It's part of the process to not be able to see a future where you're happy again. Um, but it is possible. And really, happiness isn't the goal, because that's another belief we really have in society. Like, you need to feel better and be happy and, like, put a positive spin on this terrible thing. It's really about just like, I want to live the full human experience. I want to feel the lowest lows and the highest highs, and the boring in the middle stuff. But yeah, that's, I think, so important to understand, is like, we, especially like lost parents of anyone, deserve an amazing life. And I totally think it's possible.
Yeah, and I think so many of us, like you said, think there's no way that I'll ever be able to like move forward from this. Like I'll never be happy again. I'll never, um, just things will never get better. And I always just like to tell people that, it's not like the pain will ever go away. The grief never goes away, but you're not going to spend the rest of your life every day crying all day, every day, like sitting in that heavy grief. You can smile. It's okay to be happy again, but it's, I don't know like why we think that we can't be happy after.
Yeah. Well, I really do think like it's our brain's way of just protecting us, and it just shuts down, and it does, like, it brings us into the present, and then we can't, it's like we just can't imagine that future. So I always say, like, I'll imagine it for you. I believe it for you. Even when I'm in the hospital, like holding someone's little precious baby and they are just devastated. People are like, how do you do that? How do you go in there and do that? And I always say, because I know they're going to be okay. I know that they don't see it. They can't see how you even survive what they're dealing with. But I know that they're going to be okay. And it's going to be really hard, but they're going to figure it out. Like, I have so much faith in the human spirit and in lost parents, and just how incredible they are. So that's what gives me a lot of comfort as I spend my days, as you do, with a lot of sad stories and a lot of grief. But it doesn't, like, it's not heavy to me, because I know it's just like part of the process. It's one chapter, or maybe a lot of chapters of people's story, but it's not the end.
I like that perspective a lot. I mean, because sometimes, yeah, I pretty much surrounded by lots of sad stories, and sometimes it gets heavy on me, and I'm like, I have to like step back and But I like your perspective of looking at it, that although it's sad now, like that eventually they will reach that point where they are as okay as they're going to be after a loss.
Yeah, and it's okay that they're not okay. Like, it doesn't, for me, I think it'd be worse if they weren't devastated. It'd be weird. Of course, you're going to be devastated and you're not going to know what to do. Um, but that's part of it. So I think if you're like, if anyone listening is in that deep grief, like, just love yourself right where you are, and have that little spark of hope, right? And if you're a little bit farther along, I just think maybe if you have the capacity to set some goals and just say, like I didn't have a goal, but I would look at these people and I would say, they experienced this and they're here, they're wherever they are in their life. And I want to do that too. So I didn't know what it would look like. I didn't know what it would be 10 years later. Um, but I had that something to look forward to. Um, and as I went along, I just made like little goals, like for Lauren's birthday. I don't know if I said my baby's names. It's Lauren is our daughter that was stillborn, and River is the one that we lost at 14 weeks. But for her birthday, like I would say, I don't want to, it's a sad reminder. So I'm going to do a service project. And I would have people, I volunteered with this group called Teeny Tears, and they make these little flannel diapers they donate to hospitals for like micro preemie, small babies that don't fit regular diapers. And so I'd be like, I'm going to make 100 diapers and I'm going to get everyone to help me. And I would do these goals. And every time I did it, I just set more and more and more, and set different goals. And again, just kind of like took it step by step. I think a lot of times we miss that, especially like when you hear inspiring stories. It's like, oh my gosh, like I had this terrible thing happen to me and it was awful. And then now everything's awesome. We skip the messy middle. We skip the little baby steps. We skip like celebrating. We skip the part where you're just like on the floor in your closet, bawling your eyes out. But that's all part of it.
Yeah, it
That's
doesn't
that.
just go from one right to the other.
Yeah, totally.
So, do you have any other advice for people who are newly going through loss?
I have so much advice. um, I think being kind to yourself, and that's going to look different for everyone, but really watching the way you're talking to yourself in your head. Um, Pay attention to the people in your life. I think this is a hard one for a lot of people is your relationships change. Some people have a lot of support. Some people really don't. Some people have support at the beginning and then it like goes away and they're like, I still need support. Um, but I really believe in building your support network, and it might not be the people closest to you. So I think it's really painful. You want it to be your mom, you want it to be your partner, you want it to be your best friend, but it might not be. And I think when we can let go of that expectation that they need to know you the best, they need to know what to say, they need to know what to do, they need to show up, in a certain way on special occasions. And really just find a few people. I say quality, not quantity. Just find a couple of people, and they might be some stranger off of Instagram. It might be someone from your support group. It might be a therapist. It might be a coach. It might be a podcast where you're just like, this is where I go when I need help with my grief. And I'm just going to let the people in my life be who they are. And yes, you can make requests and you can say, hey, this would be really helpful, or I would appreciate if you didn't do this or whatever. But in the end, like we can't control other people as much as we want to. Um, we can't control what they do, what they say, how much they understand. So I think it can be really exhausting, and it's one of those secondary losses that people talk a lot about. It's like we just feel like the people in our lives don't get it. I think it's okay that they don't get it. I had a lot of people that just they didn't have the capacity to show up. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to say. They didn't like talking about death. They just like weren't there. And I don't know, I don't know how I did it, but yeah, I just was like, they're doing the best they can. That's one of the best thoughts I think that helped me was like, they're doing the best they can. And sometimes their best isn't very good. I can love them anyways because then I get to feel love and I don't have to feel anger or sadness or just like all those things. Um, I can just kind of love them where they're at. And then you can use that on yourself too. Like, I'm doing the best I can. Like, I totally lost it in the grocery store, or, I was snapping at my kids because it's just like a really heavy grief day, or I like totally flaked on my friends because I just like forgot. That's something I've had to deal with a lot. Is like, I forget. I used to be very methodical and like, now I just am not. Um, but yeah, just be like, I'm doing the best I can. Other people are doing the best they can. And we're all just going to figure this out because being a human is just hard sometimes. And, and yeah, that's okay. So I think that's another really important one. Because relationships are so important to us. And I just think it's a lot of pressure to put on the people around you for them to be everything. And when we can learn, like, oh, I can go outside this circle and I can find like a professional who understands grief, who's going to explain, like, who's going to be my person to vent to or to get advice from. Um, it's just so important. And I think you can do that at any budget. I know sometimes it can feel hard or like there aren't a lot of resources, or like me, I lived really far, like I didn't have a lot of options, but you can find what you need. Like, I absolutely believe that. Um, so yeah, be kind to yourself, build a little support team that's right for you. Um, Kind of drop your expectations of the people around you that are closest to you if they're not showing up how you want them to. And then I just say, you can't go backwards in grief. I hear a lot of times people will say, I was doing so good. Like, I didn't cry for a month. And then I saw this diaper commercial and I, just like burst into tears, as if that's a bad thing, or as if you're going backwards or you're failing or you're not doing good. Right? I think that's implication. I'm sure you've heard people say this too, like, I was doing so well and then I got upset or whatever. That isn't going backwards. That isn't failing. That doesn't mean that all the work you've done to like take care of yourself, to heal your heart, to keep putting one foot in front of the other. It doesn't mean you're failing. It just means you're a human with emotions who is grieving, and all of it is okay. Right? Because again, we have this belief in our head that it should be some sort of linear hill where we start at the bottom and we get to the top. But it's just not like that. And I think when we just like let go of that belief entirely, grief gets a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right that, we all think it's supposed to be one way, and it's even, if we know that everybody grieves differently, we still expect maybe that we'll grieve a certain way, and that's not always how it happens. And so then we're like, what? Like, I don't know what's happening.
Yep.
So is there anything else that you'd like to share or add?
Um, that is a very open-ended question.
That could mean a lot of things.
Yes, I mean, I will just say to anyone listening, um, that you're loved and you matter, and there is hope. There's hope now, no matter how sad you are, and there's hope in the future. Um, and you are worthy and you are whole and you don't have to prove anything to anyone. I think our babies are such an amazing example of unconditional love. Like, whether you had a little embryo that didn't stick up to, whenever your baby passed, we love them and they didn't have to earn it and they don't have to do anything and they just are loved because they exist. And that goes for each one of us. We matter because we exist. And so I would just send that love to anyone who's hurting, and just encourage them little by little to keep going, because there's so much goodness, and you matter, and your baby matters, and you're gonna figure this out.
So, if people would like to find more information about you, where would they go for that?
It's pretty easy. It's all smooth stones. So on Instagram, I'm at amy.smoothstonescoaching. My website is smoothstonescoaching.com. And my podcast is Smooth Stones. And you should be able to find it on any podcast player or it's on my website.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I love, love, love all the things you're doing to help and support other lost parents because it's so needed.
Well, thank you so much. And obviously I appreciate what you do as well, especially the volunteering and going to help those families when they need it most.
Yeah, I had someone that came and was there for me, and I will never forget her. And I'm just grateful to be able to do it for other people and hopefully make the hardest day of their life a little bit easier.
Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing your story with us. I was definitely like you in that I had heard of stillbirth, but I thought it was a super rare occurrence. I thought it was something that only happened to distant people that I didn't know. I never once thought that I would be the one having a stillborn daughter. And I was also thinking about what you said about how you didn't know what to expect with the birth. I didn't know what to expect either. The nurses warned me that she may look different, but I didn't understand what that really meant. How would she look different? I feel like they try to prepare you, but they just really can't. I don't think you can ever know what to expect until you're the one going through the loss. All loss experiences are unique to the person going through it. We may have similar situations, but no two will be exactly alike. And just like your experience, the first thing I thought was that my daughter was just beautiful and absolutely perfect. So no, you can't ever really be prepared to go through a loss. Even if you've been through loss before, the next one can be completely different, both physically and emotionally. Loss is just so hard. We shouldn't expect it to be easy. We shouldn't expect ourselves to just move through it so quickly. It's okay to take the time we need to heal. It's okay to feel all the emotions. It's okay to just sit with your feelings. They aren't bad. They aren't wrong. I say this a lot, but sharing our experiences and our feelings about loss is so important because it helps show how truly unique our experience can be. And at the same time, it also shows that even if our loss isn't exactly the same as someone else, that we go through similar feelings and similar grief. And my always important reminder, you never have to go through loss alone. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please consider leaving a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more lost and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.